Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at Shards of the Jaguar. Shards of the Jaguar is brought to you by Clever Green Games. It's for 2 to 4 players ages 12 and up, and games are in the neighborhood of 90 minutes. The founder and first leader of your tribe was a mighty warrior. He was very powerful. The reason he was so powerful was his ability to change his shape and take the form of a jaguar. As a jaguar, he was an unstoppable force and defended your tribe successfully for many, many years. But on an unfortunate day, a mysterious enemy attacked and cursed him. And as a result, the jaguar was defeated and broken into crystal shards. You and your fellow young tribe members have to go to the sacred temple where the jaguar's remaining shards are still to be found and take part in an initiation ceremony. Your goal is to acquire the jaguar's best skills by collecting its shards, making rituals with them, and incorporating the jaguar's hunting instincts by setting traps against the others. If you are successful in your journey, you will come back as a powerful hunter, and the best of you will be the next chief of the tribe. The game has 8 rounds, and each round contains 3 main phases. First, each player sets a trap. Then they spend action points for exploring the sacred temple, and finally they activate traps and check the results. So your goal at the end of the game is to count the points you get for found crystal shards, the glory points for successful traps you set, and the player with the most points will win the game. Okay, so this game has a ton of setup, and we're not going to do a deep dive here, but let me give you some of the highlights. And depending on the player count, 2, 3, or 4 player game, will determine how you set up this board and how many of the crystals and tokens you put into play. So you've got crystals, you've got ritual tokens, you've got chest tokens and map tokens. All that's going to be variable based on the player count. But the board has very clear definitions of where you put these things. And this final board will have some exceptions to those rules as well. And then across the bottom are all the traps that you're going to be activating throughout the game, and we'll dive into those in a minute. Across the board over on the side is where you'll be starting with a set of amulets. Now, this is where you're going to be entering the board at the start of the game with your character being compelled into the temple. Now, across the top of the board is with the temple area where you're doing a lot of tracking. There's a lot of different tokens here. You have a player order for the different activation of the traps, and based on that will determine the player order coming in at the beginning of the game. And this will be variable throughout as you play. Now, there's also glory tracking that you're going to be doing, and the round tracker that will take you through the 8 rounds of the game, as well as level up tokens and ritual reward tokens, along with the Hearth of the Jaguar crystals. Around the edge of the board, you'll be placing row and column markers. We'll take a look at why these are important. And between the final board and the rest of the temple, you have the hearth wall blocker, as you can't enter into that last tile until later in the game. At the very far end of the temple, though, are escape reward tokens. Now, there's some different setup. If it's like your very first game, you may not do all of these things, but this is kind of the basics of what you see for the main temple and what you set up for play in this game. So let's take a closer look at your player board. You know, over on the far left of the board, you'll set up a cursed tracker. Yes, you start the game cursed. You start at level 4, and depending on the player count, will determine your starting health for the game as well. Now, in the middle of the board, you have some places to put different items. At the bottom is where you'll be placing amulets in the bag. And at the top is where you'll be pooling all your crystals, as well as the Heart of the Jaguar, if you are able to gather one of those large crystals. Now, on the far right of the board is for performing rituals. You'll get ritual rewards, as well as using crystals and things. You'll be placing all that over there. And that's really the basics of your player board and the basics of setup. So let's jump in and see how this game works. Like I said before, there are 4 phases to every round. This first phase is the refresh phase. Assuming we're already hip deep in the game, that refresh phase will determine the trap order track. So you're looking for the player that is in the furthest position or closest to the start of the temple. They're basically in last place trying to move across the board to get to that end point and collect as many things as possible. Now, they're going to get to place their token first in this track order selection. Now, if there are ties, there's ways around that. The rules have all kinds of ways to deal with ties, from glory points to things like that. So you can deal with that if they're in the same row and column, so to say. But generally you're looking for first, second, third, starting from the left of the board to the right of the board. And that will determine the trap order. And then you'll also move the round tracker. Phase 2 of the round is all about setting your trap. Now you'll take your marker and place it on one of the traps. And there's several to choose from. We'll look at what each of these do, but in the final phase of the round is when they'll fire off. Here you're just selecting one, and you're gonna be placing it on the paw print on one of the traps, showing that you've selected that trap. Now, some of them have tokens, and you'll look at the tokens and place one on your player board, placing it face down so you don't reveal where your trap is. Now, a lot of these traps are going to be designated by color, so you know what areas of the board are going to get trapped, so to say. Now, these first 4 have those tokens. You've got guards that are going to come out and attack. You've got poisonous gas. You've got earthquakes, and you have poison darts that fire across. Now, those are all going to affect the different players and do negative points and things like that to them, to their health and so forth. But there's also some movement traps. You've got secret door trap, which there are no tokens. You'll just place your trap activation token on there, showing you're going to use one of the trap doors. Also, there's a flood, which basically pushes players around on the board. So they're potentially bad depending on where you push people and things like that, but those last 2 traps are all about movement, and you might be using them to your advantage to get across the board perhaps. But the traps, the first 4 with tokens, you want to be mindful about where you move as you select those traps, because you don't want to be in line for the darts or the earthquakes or poisonous gas or the guards. So those are all things to keep in mind as you start to activate these traps. But remember, in this phase of the game, they don't actually fire off yet. Then we move to the action phase of the round. And on the action phase, you can perform up to 4 actions on rounds 1 through 6. However, when you get to rounds 7 and 8, you get 5 actions you can perform. And the 3 basic things you're going to be doing is movement, you're going to be taking items, and you will be healing yourself. So those are the main things you're going to be doing. But first, let's take a look at movement. So for every point you spend of action, you can move 1 space. Or you can choose to run, which gives you a +3. Now that would burn all the rest of your actions you have available. So potentially, if you used all 4 of your action points, you can move up to 7 spaces, which would move you fast across the board and maybe get you to a key location you'd be in. And of course, you need to be mindful of where the traps are going to go off that you set. Or you might need to heal yourself. And for every action point, you're going to get health back, but it's a bit of a scale. So if you spend 1 point of action, you get 1 health, but if you spend 2, you get 3. And if you spend 3, you get 5, and if you spend 4, you get 8. So it's a sliding scale for sure. And as you get that 5th action, you can even get a +3 more on your health. So those are all things to keep in mind with healing. You're going to have to balance that with all the other actions you're performing, from moving and to picking up items, which we're going to look at next. So for the take action, this will basically allow you to pick things up on the location that you're on. So if it's just crystals, you're simply going to pick them up and move them to your pool. However, if there's a chest, you flip the chest over, and these have amulets in them. And there's 3 possible amulets. You get to pick 2 of those and put them in your bag. And these are all indicated by little tokens. Now, the amulets can be used pretty much any time, and they don't burn your particular actions. You can use them to gain things like actions. So like the green amulet gives you a +1 action. The red amulet gives you a +2 on your health, which could come at a very critical time. And then you also have the black amulet, which is going to give you a -2 on the curse track. So you want to keep track of those, because curses are bad for in-game. And then you have the white amulet, which allows you to move through walls. And you have a yellow amulet, which gives you a +1 on the glory track. Now, glory track is going to get activated when you actually hit people with traps. So you get a +1 on the glory track with using that amulet if you hit someone. Then you also have the blue amulet, which is going to allow you to potentially fire off the water trap a 2nd time, or it's going to help you prevent being moved by the water trap. So there's some dual purpose there, but these amulets can be used and then discarded. They're a one-time use, just to keep them in your bag. But it is a nice currency of the game. Or you might be able to perform a ritual. So if you land on a spot and use your take action to do this, you have to have the crystals in your pool in order to activate this particular type of ritual. So you'll move those crystals over to the side of the board, showing that you've used them from your main pool and can't use them again. So you don't have an endless supply for rituals, so to say, you have to gather more. Now, the thing here is that if you are the very first one to do so, you're going to get a lot of points. So you'll look over here on the board and you'll grab the first token, which is worth 16 points. But it also levels up your character. And on the first 2 slots of your character, you get a one-time bonus when you level up. However, on that 3rd slot, you get a constant, ongoing bonus. And each of the characters in the game are going to have different bonuses and different things they can level up as. So those rituals really come into play and really add a lot. So getting these ritual tokens and adding them to the board are going to give you more points at the end of the game. And finally, you're going to be picking up map pieces. You need 2 different types of map pieces in order to find the heart of the Jaguar. So you'll grab these pieces on the main part of the board as you move ever closer to that final section. And in rounds 7 and 8, you'll have opportunity to grab one of these monster crystals, which are the most valuable crystals in the game. And what you're doing is looking for the coordinates, and that's where those map guides come into play. You're looking for the row and column defined by the map pieces, and that map is specific to you. So you combine those 2 pieces and you have to be in that location to pick up the heart of the Jaguar. Now, you get some bonus crystals here if you're the first or second player to do so. And you'll just move those to your pool, and that will give you additional points, big points, at the end of the game. And the final phase of the round is activating traps. So when your trap hits someone, you're going to get glory points for every player that you hit. Now, if the trap fires off and hits you, you're not going to get any glory points for that round at all. So keep that in mind. You want to stay out of the range of your traps. But there are bonuses along this glory track as well. You might get to level up or get additional crystals for your player board that you can use in rituals. But you're going to be activating these traps in order, moving from left to right. And the first one here we're looking at the guard. And you'll look at the different paws, and you've chosen a color. You will flip the token over on your player board. That colored paw will attack every player in that particular area, doing negative health to them, which they'll reduce on their player board. And then if you look at the gas, the poisonous gas, it's going to not only do health damage, but it's also going to cause a curse. Move them up on the curse track. Now, for the earthquake, this is again where the columns come into play, the guides that you put across the bottom. So for the token chosen there, you're going to activate and, basically an earthquake happens, and you'll do negative points of health, as well as you have a choice of doing additional health damage or doing a stun. And if you stun a player, they are going to lose an action point for that next round. Now, the poison darts, it's pretty clear. You're also looking for the colored arrows on the board. Those arrows are going to fire off and hit players in the corresponding areas. So again, you need to be careful about not having your character in any of those locations when those fire off. Now let's take a look at those last 2 traps. So those last 2 traps are all about movement. And the first one is a secret door. You have secret door tokens that you'll place out on the board. Now you'll place, then they're in your colors, which is very important because you'll place one and then 4 squares away, you'll place the other. Now, if you happen to be there, you can move through there for free, but in additional turns, if your doors are still present, you can move through for 1 action point. Now, the thing is, if someone else activates this particular trap, then your doors get replaced and they put out doors in their color. But again, the doors that are in your color are the only ones you can use. And then finally, the flood. And there's directions the flood will affect everybody on the board. So you're going to be activating the flood and pushing people 2 spaces in the direction that you so choose. Now, the thing here is there is amulets to help prevent you from being moved if you're being hit with one of these. But that is another movement to move people around on the board. And walls do stop that movement as well, so keep that in mind. And so you'll continue this way round after round until you get to that 7th and 8th round where this last tile will open up. Hopefully you have map pieces to gather the heart of the Jaguar, but then in that final 8th round, you have to escape the temple. And the guide along the side of the board comes off, and then you have to look at your health tracker. That's the amount of points or movement you have to get out of the temple, and maybe collect one of the bonus items as you escape. But you can also use amulets here, like if you have a white one to move through a wall or so forth. But depending on your health, you may not have a lot of movement points here, and you may end up with curses if you can't move far enough to get out. And so then you'll total up points to see who wins. You have different point values for the different crystals that you've collected. You get points for the rituals, you get points for the glory track, and of course negative points for curses that you have. But that big heart of the Jaguar crystal, you get 25 points for that. So you'll total up all your points, and whoever has the most will be the new chief of the village. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now with that said, this game has a lot of interesting elements to it. I've not quite played anything like this before. I really like the traps and how they go off, and there is obviously take that. And as your health diminishes, you have to keep an eye on that and all the different resources and things you're managing. But all those take actions and all the abilities and things you can do with those really adds a lot to the game. And I like all the possibilities and how those traps can really affect the other players and how you try to plan for that. But ultimately, folks, if this looks like something that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it from me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.